Welcome to the Growth Shift. I'm David Zylstra. Here's what I've learned after years in business. Every leader who's built something meaningful has a story, but the moment they had to shift, when failure forced innovation, when change became opportunity, when they chose growth over comfort. On this show, we dive into those pivotal moments, the setbacks that became breakthroughs, the strategic shifts that accelerated growth, and the frameworks that turn obstacles into opportunities. Because here's the truth. In a world where change is the only constant, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who've learned to shift strategically through it. So whether you're facing your own pivot point or just want to learn from someone who's been there, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Today, joining us on the show is Scott Dekanich, founder of Bond Connect, a digital-first surety bond brokerage based in Vancouver. Scott brings a unique perspective to the traditionally slow-moving surety industry, having built automated systems and digital solutions that streamline bond issuance for contractors across Canada. Scott, it's great to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Wow. Scott, many people think of surety bonds just as another form of insurance, right? Often getting bundled in together, but you have a different take on that. Can you explain how it is that you think about surety bonds differently and why?
Sure. Well, I'd consider, people lumping surety bonds into insurance a common misnomer, but, an understandable one because, for one, in Canada, it's the exact same licensing that allows brokers to offer surety bonds as insurance, and insurance companies are typically the ones that are offering these third-party guarantees. But the fundamental difference on insurance and surety bonds is that insurance kind of expects losses and predicts that there could be an unforeseen circumstance that would cause a loss and there would be a claim that the insurance company, expects and calculates in to pay out. On the surety side, it's more, I often encourage contractors to think of it more like a line of credit because they're still responsible for whatever the bond amount issued is. So if there's a performance bond issued for their work, that they're going to be, building a roadway or any sort of public works that commonly requires surety bonds. If they cannot complete it for whatever reason, they're still responsible for those funds. So although the surety is backing them and protecting the owner, they're not off the hook if something goes sideways on that project. So it's more similar to a line of credit. There's also 3 parties in every surety bond agreement. Insurance only has 2 parties. There's the insured and the insurer on an insurance policy. On surety bonds, there's the principal, obligee, as well as the surety, and it's a 3-way guarantee. So I know it's a little bit convoluted and not necessarily in layman terms the same way that insurance is, but yeah, I hope that explains the fundamental difference.
Yeah, I think you were able to break it down quite succinctly. I mean, in this, in the surety bond space, I think a lot, even though it's the same license that's required for an individual to be able to offer or act as a broker for surety bonds. It's widely a misunderstood part or segment of the general, let's say the broad industry, right? But this isn't where you started, right? Could you tell the audience a little bit and share a little bit about how it is you started off on this journey in the first place?
For sure. Well, like a lot of people in the insurance industry, they came in at the advice of somebody in their life, or maybe it was just an opportunity that came up. My father, pretty much from the time I was born, my understanding is he was in the insurance as well as surety bond industry, and it is common to offer both. As I was maybe 10 years old, my father started a surety bond and insurance brokerage, and that was kind of like my summer job growing up. That I would go and just learn all aspects of the brokerage and how everything started, but definitely primarily on the insurance side. A lot of construction, insurance focused clients that we had, and I was probably, as I came into the industry, I was just coming out of university, and I would probably say I was doing 60 or 70% insurance and then maybe about 30% surety. And my father had sold his brokerage by that time, but was still working there, and I got the opportunity to do that. So yeah, that's kind of how the industry for me started. It was my summer job as I was even still in high school and whatnot, and then throughout university, that would kind of do the summer internship style program. And yeah, from there, it just gradually evolved. We can get a little bit more into, I did focus more on the insurance stuff a little bit later on as I developed more knowledge in my career. And then I eventually flipped back in 2021, which I'm sure we'll get into shortly.
I mean, it sounds like you have the atypical approach to landing in the insurance industry, right? Most people, I'm sure you've heard them joke about it as well. No one looks for a career in insurance, right? But it's almost like you're a thoroughbred, right? Born and bred into it, straight through grade school, through high school, through university afterwards as well. But it seems like that tenure almost from a young age of being within the industry, or at least seeing insights to it, put you in a different position that when you actually went into the industry full time, I believe you had a bit of a different view on the industry itself, a more technical view rather than an outdated traditional view. I mean, you started with NetSurance, right? Trying to create, as you coined it, the kayak of insurance in Canada. Tell us a little bit more about that journey and how it led to what you're doing right now at Bond Connect.
Sure, absolutely. So I think it was probably as early as 2015 that I started to recognize, as I was getting a foothold in the industry and doing insurance and some bonding for a lot of large-scale civil contractors and just construction companies in general. But I was a little bit of a generalist as well. I wouldn't decline anybody that wasn't in the construction industry. That was kind of just the brokerage focus where I was working at that time. And I just realized this gap in the market in Canada specifically. I saw all of these American-based companies that were offering online insurance, Geico, State Farm, Esurance. They all had ads on the radio, on TV, on YouTube, whatever it might be, that were advertising these quick, easy ways to get quotes online and bind coverage online for basic things that everybody would need: their condo insurance, their home insurance, small business insurance, even off-road vehicles, like just small transactional pieces of business. And I saw a gap in the Canadian market that basically nobody was really doing that was directly customer facing at that time. And I came up with the concept of NetSurance. So the domain was netsurance.ca. For years, I worked with underwriters, worked with third-party software solutions, aiming to bring these products that should be fairly straightforward to rate, quote, bind, and issue policy documents in a web browser. And I learned a lot about running a company in general, running a brokerage, what it takes to do small transactional business in volume through NetSurance. And it was overall an awesome experience. I do feel I ran into a lot of roadblocks with underwriters not being ready to share rates, or even on the technological front being willing to adapt to a brokerage that couldn't necessarily guarantee volume to offer these online auto bind products. So it was a struggle at times, but overall it was a successful business. And at some point in 2021, it was acquired by a brokerage that was looking to get into the property and casualty space. And I'm sure we'll touch a little bit more on where that left me and my direction for doing the surety focus with Bond Connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's touch on that now, Scott, because we spoke the other day, and you said with your time at NetSurance, although very good, successful, one that was acquired, you learned a lot about small transactional business, right? That led to where you are now. You mentioned as well that surety bonds at the time were actually something like 80% of the business that you were doing. So it seemed like a no-brainer, right? Moving from a general brokerage into surety bonds. What did that transition look like? Was it an easy decision to make, or was there more behind it?
You know what? I would say that the decision was pretty easy. I wasn't looking to sell the business. I wasn't looking to exit NetSurance. I was actually cold approached by a brokerage that was doing group benefits only. And stepping into the property and casualty insurance space in Canada isn't easy. You need to get contracts from underwriters in order to obtain your license. They don't give away those easily. A lot of the underwriters will need a guaranteed premium volume of $1 million up front to be able to even consider setting up a new brokerage. There's other times, if the relationship's there, that those can happen, but that was kind of how this stemmed from the purchasing brokerage, I think. It's just not easy to get your foot in the door with the property and casualty stuff. And for me, the small transactional business was great, and it was kind of what I originally had set out to do. But with NetSurance, a lot of my focus was spent on ranking for keywords, especially long-tailed keywords, for all types of products that I was an expert in or was able to offer either online or just knew about from my previous experience. And so that was surety bonds. And, during that time, I'd say I guess it was luck of the draw that there were contractors that were seeking larger scale surety bonds than insurance solutions that would come through the door for NetSurance. So a lot of the insurance stuff was small, transactional, would take a lot of time, which it adapted over time, and it definitely had improved. And the amount of touch points and administration on the back end, it started out not so great and taking a lot of time, and then it evolved and adapted over time to be better. Yeah, it just basically, the large scale surety contracts where you're talking in the tens of millions, 40 million, 50 million, those guarantees are sizable premiums, and just the amount of work that it takes to put one of those together ends up being a lot less than the thousands of policies that it would take to push a similar amount of premium through on the transactional side. So that's kind of where the brokerage was sitting when I was approached about purchasing it. And, after I think it was about 3 weeks of due diligence on the purchaser's part before we had come to an agreement. And surety bonds was just not something that the purchasing broker was familiar with. And they had to ask me, do you want to be on your way with that? I think it fit perfectly. Yeah, so it went off pretty smoothly. I'm still friendly with the brokerage. They're called the Reframe Group. They're based in Vancouver as well. They're great, and they're running the property and casualty business going forward, and that's allowed me to just focus on Bond Connect and surety bonds.
Yeah, that's really neat. So it wasn't a door that you were looking to walk through, but it was one that was open, and it seemed like a bit of a no-brainer to take that opportunity. Now, you started NetSurance with more of a digital focus in mind, right? And when you made that transition to Bond Connect, you didn't leave that digital focus behind, right? You've built out some pretty sophisticated digital tools, including things like automated bond calculators and electronic issuance systems, right? Can you walk us through, how much of an impact that's having on you and your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So, surety bonds still to this day, I would say we're probably at about 50 to 60% electronic issuance across the board in Canada. And that's up to the obligees that are requesting the bonds. So for any surety bond, again, where it differs from insurance, the principal, who's the one pursuing the bond, they're not protected in a sense from that bond. Somebody told them that they need it, and that's why they've come to get it. Now, so everybody that is shopping for a surety bond they've been instructed by somebody that they need it. Now, a lot of these obligees, they've just, been stuck in the past to some extent. They only want the paper copies of the bonds. They're not willing to accept any sort of electronic verification of the bonds. And I think, COVID really sparked the gradual acceptance of electronic bonds to where we've gotten today, where it's over 50% electronic issuance, both on public tenders as well as license bonds for different bodies of authority that manage licensing across separate industries, electrical contractors, gas contractors. Every province kind of has a unique authoritative body that may or may not require bonds in a specific industry. So I saw that opportunity. I was pushing for it for a long time, especially for the smaller scale bonds, a $10,000 or $25,000 bond penalty for a license where the premium's very low, a few $100s. And the questions to approve somebody for those types of bonds could all be answered in 7 questions or something like that. So I just saw those as being ripe for automation and offering them in a web browser. So even during NetSurance time, I was offering some surety bonds electronically, and I drew on my experience from getting together some of these insurance products that were automated, as well as the third-party businesses that would assist in integrating that with an underwriter. Yeah, it's been great overall. Probably the largest products that are automated right now for us that we offer on our website are the BC electrical and gas contractor license bonds. We do a significant volume of those. It's Technical Safety BC that manages them. We have an agreement with them where we'll send digitally verified copies of the bond, collect signatures, indemnity, that sort of thing, all in a web browser. And it's just, ideally over time, I do think that stopping forgery of surety bonds, which, believe it or not, still happens. And I've been privy, even over the past couple of years, to people trying to forge surety bonds. I feel that the electronic ones are, the mechanisms that we put in place will be able to stop forgery more than paper copies. The ones that I've heard about recently have all been paper copy forgeries. And that's primarily the reason that the obligees don't want electronic copies, is I think they're concerned about forgery. And we can get into more about why they want those paper copies. There's something called a seal that embosses the paper that's pretty hard to fake, that it's issued from the insurance companies that get issued on every surety bond. But electronic verifications, I feel, especially as there's more and more obligees accepting them, it's the way to go, and it'll continue to evolve in the industry.
Yeah, wow. And I mean, that statistic is crazy too. You mentioned that only 50% of the industry or 50% of bonds being issued are digitally, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
that's just a rough estimate, based off of our business
sure.
internally for the approximate amount of what we issue paper that either goes out on Canada Post if it's, one of the smaller license or permit bonds, or via courier if it's a tender bond or something with a larger figure on it.
That's still, even if it's close to 50 above, give or take a little bit, like that's a huge gap in the market for, growth, maybe just an opportunity for growth. Scott, it almost seems like you're a little bit of an early mover at Bond Connect when it comes to, digital issuance of bonds. How many other brokerages are trying to compete in the space right now, approximately? I mean, is there a lot of competition?
You know what? In terms of brokerages that are actually managing digital issuance, I think that there are probably very few. I maybe know of one other one that's actually pursuing that. But where that, there are third-party businesses that step in to do this sort of thing. For the public tender bonds, there's two companies specifically. There's one called Mobile Bonds. There's another one called Signature Master. Both of them are approved by the Surety Association of Canada to be acceptable forms of digitally verified surety bonds. So when you see a municipality, City of Vancouver, City of Toronto, or any of the municipalities across Canada posting public tenders for a construction bid, they will state explicitly on their tender documents oftentimes that you must use one of the formats that are acceptable by the Surety Association of Canada. So although I might be early on the brokerage side, there are solutions that pop up that enable these other brokers to offer the electronically verified surety bonds. And ultimately, it's up to the obligee at the end of the day, the ones that are requesting the bond, how they want to accept these electronically verified forms of bonds. So I've had success reaching out to obligees and trying to eliminate the cumbersome process of collecting the hard copy bonds, saving them indefinitely, not knowing whether they're renewed. Oftentimes these license bonds will be in place until canceled. And all it takes is one missing letter and then a bond could be in place that isn't supposed to be if the cancellation letter in paper doesn't come through to the obligee or is missed in whatever fashion. So I feel like, although a lot of brokers are offering it through these third parties, we are ahead of the curve on adapting a lot of the electronic forms of verification for obligees. So I plan on continuing to work with primarily obligees to get more and more of those bonds done online and digitally verified.
So if we're looking at the nature of surety bonds themselves, right? I mean, like, it seems like many people across the country need them, whether they be small contractors or independent business owners, large property developers, or, many other types of professionals and companies. Right. It seems like there's a huge volume of people that need them. It seems like there's a big opportunity, a big area of opportunity in the industry for people to do things differently. It sounds like you're one of those people who are trying to do things differently with Bond Connect. But how is it that you stand out in the marketplace to really get noticed by the people who need what you can do for them?
Sure. Well, something I learned during the days when I was establishing NetSurance was getting in front of clients on organic search is really important. That is one of the ways that we try to stand out and get new clients, providing useful content online, following all the standard search engine optimization pursuits that are set forth by Google, which, still is probably the primary search engine for most users. Just really providing straightforward and useful content for people that are looking at bonds for the first time and probably don't know a lot about them. That's one of the ways that we try to get in front of people. In terms of being set apart, I mean, I think the most important part of the business is being surety first and surety focused. It is an entirely different industry with an entirely different set of knowledge required from the broker in explaining everything to clients and making sure they have the appropriate bond wordings, or a lot of the times clients will inquire and they're not even sure what they want. Somebody mentioned bonding, and then they'll need us to review documentation for them and really explain what they need, because it's not always clear and it's just an ambiguous topic in general, not being something in common knowledge amongst most people. So that's what I would say is the biggest thing that sets Bond Connect apart, is just the surety standalone focus, which can be a double-edged sword sometimes. Some contractors might want to get their insurance and surety at the same place. I can get into reasons why that always isn't ideal, but just being able to focus on strictly bonds, I think sets us apart and sets the client up for success to ensure that they're getting the best rates and the best limits and that sort of thing in the marketplace.
So Scott, at Bond Connect, you're niched down, right? And you're focusing on standalone surety bonds, right? It puts you in a unique position where you can provide some incredible value. You're utilizing SEO, search engine optimization, you're utilizing SEO with organic search results. And I mean, it's been working for you, right? You've come so far with it, but I also understand you're up against maybe what's a unique challenge. When we spoke previously, you mentioned that almost 90% of the people coming to you inquiring don't actually qualify for bonding. Why is that?
Sure. Well, that's specifically on the contract surety side of things. So we can split bonding into basically two primary categories. There's commercial bonding and contract bonding. Now, most construction companies, and there's other industries where contract bonding is required too, but construction is the most prominent one. Any of these public tenders or just larger tenders that require the different types of contract bonds, which are a bid bond, performance bond, labor and material payment bond. Those are some of the common forms of contract bonds. There are pretty stringent requirements on the underwriter's side to consider putting together what's called a bond facility at all. So offering these types of contract bonds to our clients, the minimum requirements, these days are looking somewhere around 150,000 in equity and working capital, as well as a finalized year end that's accountant prepared, done, sophisticated enough that it makes sense. A lot of new businesses, they want to grow fast, they have their first bonded job come up. Well, sometimes they haven't even reached their first year end, or they don't have any capital at all. And underwriters are concerned with, if they're going to issue $500,000 guarantee for one of these companies that's brand new, even if they have the experience somewhere else, they were managing for another company or something like that, they want some form of assurance, which is in the form of capital primarily, that they're actually going to be capable of performing this work. So underwriting parameters of contract surety aren't the most exciting topic, but it is something that's very common in this industry. They call it the 3 C's of surety. It's character, capacity, and capital. And anybody that's inquiring about contract bonds for the first time needs to check off all of those. Character is who they are, what they've done to date. Capacity is, do they have the equipment? Do they have the experience? And capital is pretty self-explanatory, but it's, do they have the capital that it takes to perform this type of work? A lot of the reason why it's tough to place majority of the new business that comes through the door, it's their first time ever pursuing bonds. Maybe they've only been in business for 6 months. And just on the underwriting side, I would love to have a solution for these types of contractors, but it's really a restriction on the underwriting side. That's what makes it a little bit tough. So it's a lot of education that never turns into business, to be honest. But that's where the industry is right now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's just people in need and desiring something, wanting something that they can't actually get at this point in time, right? So it's not like there's anything that the market can do about that other than wait for hopefully these people to come around to the right point to qualify for the underwriting criteria anyways, right? You're attracting a lot of potential business through your organic SEO, right? Perhaps not that you're attracting the wrong people, but the wrong people are finding what you're doing. What are some of your thoughts on perhaps how it is you're going to approach attracting more qualified individuals who really are suitable for what you can do for them?
Yeah, in terms of the organic SEO space, that is really just a numbers game, I would say. It's like, like once in a while there might be an established business that has never needed bonds to date, and now they have their first contract that requires bonding. Those are a little bit easier to set up, but in terms of gaining established contractors that already have a bond facility elsewhere and proving to them that we can do better service than the incumbent broker, or there's some reason for them to move, is a little bit tougher. I think just gradually continuing to generate content and be available to clients when we need them, doing outreach when we see successful bids on contracts that we know are bonded that are public results. That's kind of the way of getting in front of the clients that are more qualified and desirable for a surety brokerage. But the industry is pretty small, and I know a lot of the brokers, especially in the West, and the top ones, I know that they're doing a good job. So moving some of that business is not easy and not something that I really pursue. But just being available to clients and providing the content and, getting it out on LinkedIn or socials, or just even when Googling for more information, sometimes contractors will do that too. Yeah, what you're mentioning is not an easy task to have more qualified contractors come through the door for us.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's difficult to really stand out and attract the right people. But I wouldn't say you're a newer player in the industry, but you're making a mark, right? I mean, Scott, where you started, you were born and bred into the industry, so to speak, right? You found your space with NetSurance, and it was going well. You weren't looking to exit, but someone came a knocking. It was the right move to make. You went through the door. You find yourself here with Bond Connect, right? You're growing. You found a space with organic SEO, bringing in leads, figuring out still how to bring in the right ones. It sounds like volume will be part of that as well. But I mean, what's next? What's next for Bond Connect? I mean, with this digital first approach that you're taking, how is it that you're planning to start to scale some of what you're doing now?
Sure. So one thing I just wanted to clarify about the difficulty in placing new inquiries. On the commercial side, the smaller, more transactional bonds, those qualification metrics are often a lot more straightforward. So a lot of the digital first products that we offer, pretty much anybody qualifies. As long as you haven't declared bankruptcy recently, you can obtain these bonds, and they're fairly straightforward questions. A lot of the times we'll be able to offer them directly through a web browser that we host, or through an underwriting portal that one of our underwriting partner hosts. So I just wanted to clarify that part. There are a lot of surety bonds that pretty much everybody can obtain. A lot of the license and permit ones, those are more straightforward. It's more on the contract side with the larger scale stuff.
Definitely don't want to misrepresent what you're doing at Bond Connect, especially if someone's listening to this thinking, oh, that doesn't sound right. But yeah, appreciate the clarification, Scott.
And in terms of what's next, planning on just continuing to elaborate on the product offering. We're always looking for gaps in the market where there's a transactional type of surety bond that doesn't have complicated underwriting metrics that we can digitize and get the obligee on board with accepting them. One that happened recently that, we can't take credit for, but it was a big transition. Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, recently had new parameters where every importer into Canada would be required to post a bond to import any sort of goods. That's for release prior to payment, or RPP bond. Now, we didn't convince CBSA to start accepting electronic forms of bonds, but there was communications with the Surety Association of Canada and arranging that. And that's one that we've been doing a ton of recently. There was a deadline on May 20th, actually, to have all of these importers post the bonds, and they're all electronic. So CBSA is only posting electronic forms of bonds, and we're managing that primarily through a couple different underwriting partners, but they've established their own electronic connection via API with CBSA. I think there's about 16 underwriters in Canada that have established that, and in terms of the qualification metrics, the application, the payment, and the bond issuance, that's all done electronically. So that was one recently that is a success story that we can't claim responsibility for, but we definitely adopt that and continue to do it. So I'm just always looking for new opportunities where there's these products that are transactional and ripe for digitization on the surety bond side, educating the obligees and making sure that there's an underwriter there willing to provide these bonds for, an application that can be done easily in a web browser. They can answer a few questions, do a digital signature, that's transposed onto a bond, and we have an electronic verification issuance system that would send directly and integrate with the obligees. That's the focus on the digital front. And always looking to help more contractors with their bonding, make sure they have optimal rates, optimal limits, that sort of thing. And a lot of those are also gradually getting digitized on the tender side. That means when contractors are bidding on new work. So just making sure that process is as streamlined as possible and as little clunky paper as possible. Something else that we haven't touched on is what's called an indemnity agreement. That's always, until probably the past couple of years, underwriters require that signed prior to issuing any bonds. And just now, they're pretty much all accepting electronically verified signatures for their indemnity agreements, whereas before they had to be printed, signed by hand, and sent by a courier, and then the underwriters would review it when it was arrived. And that would definitely hold up the process, especially if there was urgent bonds to be issued for the first time and an indemnity agreement wasn't signed yet. So just, continuing digitization of all aspects of the industry.
Yeah. And, with this focus on continuing the digitization and, focusing on these areas you can grow into, when it comes to AI, how does that start to play into your strategy and your plans moving forwards?
I've used AI a lot. I've played with AI a lot. It's something that we need to be careful with, especially when dealing with sensitive client information and where that's going exactly and what the agreements are for the web hosted AIs. I mean, AI's assisted to date with content creation. I've had to teach it Surety, I think, for the most part, because it gets information from all different places online, and depending on the region, the information can be quite a bit different. The bond wordings, the bond types, the standards, everything can be quite a bit different. And even if you try to reference specifically the Canadian surety bond industry, AI just sometimes has a tough time with content, but it's definitely a tool on that end. The vibe coding side of things, where you can get AI to help with development of, like you mentioned before, the rate calculator, or even just parameters for how to pull data from somewhere and populate it elsewhere. Those are all areas that AI can really help. But I think something that will be a game changer when it's ready and available is, it's a newish buzzword in the AI space, but an AI agent, and having AI agents with specific tasks internally that are hosted internally. I think that's one of the things where I could see AI really grabbing hold. A lot of surety stuff is heavy on the administration side internally with the brokerage as well as the underwriter, and leveraging AI to manage some of that, even though it's sensitive data, going to be very useful going forward. We just need to make sure that whether it's hosting the LLMs locally on one of the brokerage rigs, or you just need to be careful, especially when it's clients' financial information and their surety bond information, where that's all going. So I see a lot of cases for AI going forward in bonding, but a lot of insurance companies and their surety underwriting arms have issued sweeping bans on the use of AI for all of their employees. So majority of them, in fact, as an employee and an underwriter of that company, they've just said you cannot use AI. I mean, obviously, the first thing that they think of is feeding it financial information and getting the AI to dissect financial position of a contractor, for example. The data is just not clear where that's going right now, and I think that's one of the reasons for the ban on it. So that's something that, until proven safe, we're not doing, and neither are the underwriters. But those are some of the pain points that are preventing adoption right now of AI in the industry, I think.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of risk around those things, especially within insurance and finance, right? Because if you're not trained on how to use AI properly, or you're not hosting it on a virtual private server, for example, you don't know where the information is going at the end of it, who's having access to it, and the data that you're getting back out of it. If you don't know how to feed it in properly, you could be stuck with hallucinations. And if you're using that, in a rating or in underwriting, everything could be off. So you could be compromising everything that you're doing if you don't know the right approach to take. So yeah, definitely taking the right approach and, knowing what you're doing is essential, especially in regulated industries around AI itself. Scott, for yourself and for Bond Connect, if there's one thing you're looking forward to, or even one challenge you're facing today that, you wish you could solve with AI or would be most excited to solve with AI, what would that be?
I think internal administration of tracking, posting, collecting data from all of the different transactional bonds and sorting them appropriately. That's probably the first place that I would say is a great spot that AI could solve so much of the time expenditure that it takes to do these administrative tasks internally. With some of the automated systems online that don't leverage AI exactly, but is kind of an internal rating system, and then it would produce documents based on the inputs in field data. Even though that part's automated on the client side, on the back end, both for the underwriters as well as the brokerage, there's not a ton of solutions that streamline that. So I feel that, having AI come in and sort some of that data and have it available in a fashion that's easily accessible and dissectable, and you can pull statistics on it and that sort of thing. I think one of the spots where I see the biggest opportunity that could be solved quickly where AI is at right now in terms of, the complexity of what it's capable of. Again, you need to be careful of what you mentioned, hallucinations or just getting incorrect data. I've used AI before for public tenders, dissecting information from a municipality that would be posted publicly, so it's publicly available on the internet, and having AIs try to dissect, say, the tender closing date, the tender validity period, when the start and completion date of the contract is, all these different things, and it's commonly a 300 to 500 page document. To be honest, I haven't found the most success with that. Tried a few different AIs to solve that problem, but that's one maybe it just takes some training and a little bit more information to ensure that it's working properly and understands truly what to look for. That's another area that I think is ripe for improvement with AI is dissecting tender and contract documents that are commonly very long. So
Yeah, absolutely. The time-saving capability is amazing when used properly, of course. Scott, what sort of advice might you give to other professionals in traditional professional industries who want to embrace this digital transformation, but maybe they're facing resistance or challenges?
the first thing I would say is to try it. I think a lot of people, especially maybe if they're later in their career or don't consider themselves digitally native, might struggle with AI or being able to use it. With a 10-minute YouTube tutorial, you could get in learning the basics about AI. It can help with digital transition for all of these different aspects of the business that's only been expedited over the past 5 years. And, you'll see this so much, and it's a little bit corny now, but oftentimes people will say, no, AI isn't going to replace your job, but you're going to get replaced with somebody that knows how to use AI. And I mean, maybe that's not entirely true in all industries, but I feel like it's a good skill to have to at least understand the back end. So I would say just try it and see what it can do and see what it can do for your specific industry and what improvements it can make in your workflow. It's been a game changer in a lot of aspects of running a business in general, even if it's just kicking ideas back and forth about how to improve certain processes or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific task, even just like a brainstorming activity. So I think that's my number one piece of advice is just try AI if you haven't yet, and try it more if you have, and just keep up with it. It moves so fast.
Fantastic. That's excellent, Scott. Thank you so much. That was great. Thank you for sharing your insights, your journey and some of your advice with the audience. Thank you for joining the show today.
Thanks, David.
For any listeners who might like to connect with you to learn more about Bond Connect, or maybe even just to continue the conversation, what would be the best way to reach out?
Sure. Well, our website is an easy way to touch base, whether it's related to a specific product or just for a consultation. That's bondconnect.ca. So bondconnect.ca. I'm also on LinkedIn, Scott Dekanich. I'm sure my name will be here on the podcast, but reaching out on LinkedIn works as well. So either one of those works great.
Fantastic. To our listeners, thank you for tuning into the podcast. As always, I hope this episode has brought you valuable insight, knowledge, and inspiration. If it did, please would you show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, we're signing off. And that's a wrap on another episode of The Growth Shift. If this conversation sparked something for you, whether it's a new perspective on failure, a a strategy you want to try, or just the reminder that every setback can become a setup for something bigger, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, the leaders who thrive aren't the ones who avoid change. They're the ones who shift strategically through it. If you're ready to build the systems that help you grow without the chaos, head over to valentix.io. We help businesses like yours scale smarter, not harder. I'm David Zylstra, and I'll see you in the next shift.